Claire's pen hovered over the divorce papers, ready to surrender her daughter. Then a tall black man stopped at her table. "I know that cane," he said, and everything changed.
The coffee shop smelled of roasted beans and faint cinnamon, the kind of cozy scent designed to calm restless minds. But for Claire Donovan, seated in the farthest corner booth with her briefcase flung open, there was no calm, only a restless churn in her chest that refused to settle. The papers in front of her, divorce papers, looked deceptively harmless, thin stacks of legal language written in the detached, clinical style of attorneys who didn't have children wrapped up in the outcome. To anyone else, they might have looked like ordinary contracts. To Claire, they looked like a death sentence. Every clause read like a betrayal. Every other weekend with her daughter, alternating holidays, 6 months of supervised visits. Cold words, sharp as glass, drafted by her husband's powerhouse lawyer. She'd spent a decade in family law herself, wielding these kinds of clauses as weapons. But it was different when you were the one on the receiving end, like being stabbed with the very knife you'd once sharpened. Claire's pen hovered. She could sign. She could end this ordeal, close the book, and move forward. That's what her ex-husband, David, wanted. That's what his lawyer had designed these papers to do, wear her down until exhaustion made her surrender. But surrendering meant more than giving up a marriage that had already rotted from the inside out. It meant giving up Lily, their 8-year-old daughter, to a man who'd never cared enough to show up for school plays or bedtime stories. It meant letting David rewrite their family narrative into one where money outweighed love. Claire blinked against the sting in her eyes and pressed the pen to the page. "Are you sure you want to sign those here?" The voice startled her so much she nearly dropped the pen. Her gaze snapped up, colliding with a stranger's. A tall black man stood beside her booth, coffee cup in hand. He had the kind of presence that demanded notice, even if he hadn't spoken. Broad shoulders, strong jawline, eyes so deep and steady they seemed to absorb her chaos without judgment. But his expression was gentle, though, almost careful, like he was afraid she might break if he wasn't. Claire's instinct kicked in. Cover the papers, protect her privacy. She tugged her briefcase over them like a shield. "Excuse me?" she said, her tone sharper than she meant. He nodded toward the edge of the legal document still visible under the flap. "Divorce papers," he said softly. "I recognize the letterhead, Brooks and Myers. They represented my ex-wife 2 years ago." Heat rushed to her cheeks. Of all the coffee shops in Portland, she'd picked this one precisely because it was far from downtown, from colleagues, from the watchful eyes of people who might whisper about the glamorous blonde attorney whose marriage was crumbling. Yet here was this stranger who not only noticed, but named her pain with disarming ease. She straightened her shoulders, reaching for her attorney voice. "I don't usually discuss my personal business with strangers." "Fair enough," he replied smoothly, unoffended. His lips quirked in a faint smile. "But instead of walking away, I was hoping you'd let me sit. This is my regular spot, and all the other tables are taken." Claire glanced around the shop. 3 tables sat empty, sunlight slanting across them through tall windows. His claim was a lie, but a strangely gentle one, a polite fiction, as if he knew she'd never accept company unless given an excuse. Against her better judgment, she found herself nodding. He slid into the booth opposite her, setting his coffee down with unhurried ease. "Marcus Hale," he said, extending his hand. Her hesitation lasted only a second before she took it. His hand was warm, strong, with the faint roughness of calluses, unusual for someone who spoke with the cadence of a professional. She filed that observation away, surprised at how easily she noticed details about him. "Claire," she said. "Claire Donovan." "Well, Claire Donovan, what kind of work brings you to this side of town on a Tuesday afternoon?" The question was casual, but she knew what he was really saying. "You don't look like you belong here." And he wasn't wrong. Claire usually lived in the gleaming towers of Portland's legal district, where marble floors and glass walls reflected status and ambition. She never ventured to this working-class stretch of Division Street unless she wanted to disappear. "I'm an attorney," she answered carefully. "Family law." His eyebrows rose just slightly, enough to suggest interest but not judgment. "And now you're on the other side of the table." Something in the way he said it pierced her. She gave a bitter little laugh. Something like that. That's got to be brutal, Marcus said, his voice low, steady, knowing all the strategies that can be used against you, seeing them weaponized firsthand. The truth of it landed hard. David's attorney was using every trick Claire once mastered herself. She should have felt prepared. Instead, she felt like she was sinking in quicksand, her professional knowledge only making the betrayal sharper. Needing to turn the spotlight away from herself, she asked, "What do you do?" "Social work. Family services mostly. Kids who've been through trauma, separations, custody battles, that kind of thing." The answer explained the calm empathy radiating from him. He was a man who walked through wreckage daily and somehow still believed in rebuilding. "That must be difficult work," she murmured. "It is," he admitted, "but it's meaningful. I get to help families find their footing again, help kids process what no child should have to endure." His words echoed in my chest, mingling uncomfortably with my own reasons for entering family law, the idealistic ones I'd buried years ago under billable hours in corporate strategy. "I thought I wanted to help people too," I confessed, before I could stop myself. "But corporate divorce law, it's more about protecting assets than protecting families. Turns out being successful doesn't mean you're happy." The admission startled me. I'd barely let myself think it, let alone say it out loud. Yet here I was, spilling truth to a man I'd just met. "I'm sorry about your divorce," Marcus said quietly. "It's never easy, even when you know it's necessary." "You sound like you speak from experience." "I do," he said simply. 2 years' worth. He told me briefly about his ex-wife, about the kids, Tyler, 10, and Maya, 7, who split weekends between households. His tone carried no bitterness, only the resigned sadness of a man who had chosen to keep moving rather than get stuck in anger. Claire found herself leaning in, listening not just to his story, but to the steadiness in his voice. She thought of Lily, how her daughter asked at night if Daddy had left because she'd done something wrong. How Claire, exhausted, could only whisper reassurances she wasn't sure her daughter believed. Marcus must have seen the pain flicker across her face. "How old is your daughter?" he asked gently. Her eyes widened. "How did you?" "The way you said children when I mentioned mine," he said, a half-smile tugging at his lips. "And the drawing taped to your briefcase. That's hers, isn't it?" Claire looked down at the crayon sketch, Lily's gift that morning. A family portrait with only 2 figures now instead of 3. Her throat tightened. "She's 8, she whispered, "and she's struggling." "Of course she is," Marcus said, his tone steady. "Her world just cracked in half, and she doesn't have the tools to process it. That's not her fault, and it's not yours either." The certainty in his voice broke something inside her. She'd been drowning in guilt, convinced every tear Lily shed was proof of her failure. But Marcus spoke like someone who knew, someone who'd lived it and walked through the fire. For the first time since she'd opened her briefcase that afternoon, she pushed the papers aside. She wasn't ready to sign. Not yet.
The following afternoon, Claire found herself distracted at work. Case files sat untouched on her desk, the muted hum of the office blending into white noise. She'd been in the same law firm for nearly 12 years, long enough to know how to compartmentalize personal problems. But the stranger at the coffee shop, the way he'd seen through her defenses with almost surgical precision, kept intruding on her thoughts. Marcus Hale. She'd repeated the name enough times that it felt carved into her memory. Most men she encountered were either adversaries in court or colleagues competing for prestige. Marcus was neither. He was outside her world entirely, and that made him dangerous. Not in a threatening sense, but in the way he had unsettled her, forcing her to acknowledge truths she preferred to bury. Her phone buzzed with a message from her paralegal. Reminder, deposition prep with client at 4. Claire sighed, rubbing her temples. The life she'd built, the career, the marriage, the reputation, was crumbling, and she no longer knew if she wanted to fight for the pieces. At 4:15, midway through coaching a client on how to appear sympathetic under questioning, her mind betrayed her again. She remembered Marcus saying, "It's not divorce that breaks kids, it's the uncertainty." The words clung to her ribs like they belonged to her instead of him. By the end of the day, she couldn't take it anymore. Instead of driving home, she found herself heading back to grind coffee. She told herself it was coincidence. Maybe she just wanted another cappuccino. Maybe she wanted a quiet space to think. But the truth slipped out when she spotted him. Marcus was there, at their booth. He looked up as if he knew she would come, his expression flickering into the kind of smile that warmed before it spread. He lifted a hand in greeting. "Claire." Her pulse betrayed her, quickening. "Do you live here?" she asked, half a tease, half genuine curiosity, as she slid into the booth across from him. "Close enough," he said. "And you?" "I work nearby," she lied. Though technically her office was 15 minutes away, it felt easier than admitting she'd come looking for him. A server appeared, and Marcus pushed a cappuccino toward her before she could order. "I took a guess," he said. Her lips curved despite herself. "Good guess." For a few beats, silence stretched between them, not awkward, but charged. Claire wasn't used to silence with men. With David, silence was always strategy, a battlefield where words were withheld to exert control. With Marcus, silence felt like permission to breathe. He leaned forward slightly. "So, did you sign the papers?" Her throat tightened. She shook her head. "No, I was going to. Then I heard your voice in my head. That line about uncertainty breaking kids more than divorce. It made me realize I was about to agree to something that wasn't right for Lily." Marcus studied her face, his gaze steady. "What's in the proposal?" She laid it out. The alternating weekends, the supervised visits, the way David's lawyer framed her as unstable because she'd taken time off after Lily's birth. Her voice cracked as she admitted, "I was willing to accept it because I just wanted the fighting to stop. But it's not fair to her." "It's not," Marcus agreed, his tone even, "and the court will care more about who's been her primary caregiver than about who earns the bigger paycheck. You've been there for her day to day, haven't you?" Claire blinked. The words were simple, but they struck like revelation. She had been there. Doctor's visits, homework, every scraped knee and nightmare. She'd carried the weight of parenthood while David built his empire. "I have," she whispered. "Then fight like it," Marcus said softly. "Not for you, for her." The conviction in his voice made something inside her stir. Strength, the thing she'd been running on fumes without. For the next hour, the conversation wandered. Marcus told her about his kids, Tyler with his serious eyes and encyclopedic knowledge of dinosaurs, Maya with her fearless questions that left adults stumbling. Claire shared snippets of Lily's quirks, how she lined her crayons by color before drawing, how she insisted on sleeping with the lamp on because darkness reminded her too much of Daddy not being there. Claire realized with a jolt that she was telling him things she hadn't told anyone. Her colleagues would dismiss them as irrelevant. Her ex would use them as ammunition. But Marcus listened as if Lily's habits mattered in the grand scheme of the universe. At one point, he asked her a question that stopped her cold. "Why did you become a lawyer?" She opened her mouth to answer with her usual line about wanting stability, prestige, financial independence. But those weren't the truth. The truth slipped out before she could stop it. Because I thought I could help families. I thought I could make the system fairer. But I got swallowed by the machine. All the billable hours, the client demands. I lost sight of the people." Marcus's eyes softened. "Maybe you haven't lost sight. Maybe you're just remembering now." Her chest tightened. She wanted to deflect, to retreat behind sarcasm, but his words were too close to the bone. They lingered until the cafe's lights dimmed for closing. As they stood, Marcus paused, his gaze steady on her. "Claire, I want to ask you something." Her heart fluttered in her throat. "What? You're asking me for professional advice or personal conversation?" The question startled her, not because she didn't know the answer, but because she realized she didn't want to choose. "Maybe both," she admitted. His lips curved into that slow, knowing smile. "Then yes, let's meet again, but next time somewhere you don't feel like you're hiding." Claire nodded, her pulse racing as she stepped out into the cool Portland night. For the first time in months, she wasn't thinking about David or the custody battle or the shame of divorce. She was thinking about Marcus Hale, about the way his voice steadied her chaos, about the way he made her believe she hadn't completely failed. And as she drove home, she realized something dangerous. She was looking forward to tomorrow. By the time Saturday rolled around, Claire Donovan felt a nervous energy she hadn't known in years.
She had spent the morning fussing with her wardrobe as though she were preparing for something more than coffee with a friend. Jeans or dress pants? Sweater or blouse? It wasn't a date, she told herself firmly. Marcus Hale wasn't her lawyer, wasn't her therapist, wasn't anything but a man who'd happened to sit down across from her at Grind Coffee one afternoon. And yet, he was more than that now. She settled on dark jeans and a soft cream sweater, something casual enough to signal this wasn't business, but neat enough to reassure herself she still had control over how she presented. When she arrived at the café, Marcus was already there, waiting near the window. The late morning sun caught the planes of his face, sharpening his jawline, softening his eyes. He stood when he saw her, a subtle gesture that made her pulse flicker. "I took the liberty of ordering for you," he said, sliding a cappuccino across the table as she sat. "You seemed like the cappuccino type." She laughed, the sound lighter than she expected. "You're 2 for 2 now." They began with small talk, the weather, a case he was testifying in, an article she had read. But before long, the conversation curved back to the thing that always hovered between them: divorce. "I didn't sign the papers," Claire admitted, almost blurting it out. Marcus's expression sharpened with interest. "What changed your mind?" "You did," she confessed. "The way you talked about fighting for what matters most, about putting your kids first. I realized I was about to accept something that wasn't in Lily's best interest. I just wanted the conflict to be over, but at her expense." Marcus leaned forward, elbows braced on the table, gaze steady. "So don't accept it. He may have money and lawyers, but you have the one thing they can't manufacture: consistency. Judges care about who's been present, who's been the anchor. That's you." Her breath hitched. "That's what I keep trying to tell myself, but I'm terrified it won't be enough." "Fear doesn't mean you're wrong," he said gently. "It just means you care enough to feel it." The simplicity of his words sank deeper than any polished argument from her attorney. For the next 2 hours, they talked about children, about mistakes, about what it meant to raise a child while rebuilding yourself. Marcus told her about Tyler's sudden temper outbursts and Maya's habit of asking if everything was her fault when plans went wrong. Claire admitted that Lily cried herself to sleep some nights, whispering she was afraid Mommy might leave her too. Marcus didn't offer quick fixes. He nodded, he shared, he told the truth, that parenting through divorce was messy, that children's fears couldn't be erased overnight, and that what mattered most was showing up consistently with love. When they finally left the cafe, the crisp air of Portland's fall wrapped around them. They walked a few blocks together, conversation still flowing easily. At a corner, Marcus paused. "There's a community event next weekend, family-friendly, art projects, music. I usually take Tyler and Maya. You could bring Lily." The suggestion startled her. "Bring her?" "Only if you're comfortable," he added quickly. "It's good for kids to see other families going through changes. It normalizes things, makes them feel less alone." Claire hesitated. The idea of introducing her daughter to this man, this near stranger, who already felt less like a stranger than most people she knew, sent panic and hope racing in equal measure. She thought of Lily's loneliness, her whispered questions at night. Maybe seeing other children whose parents weren't together would help. "I'll think about it," Claire said softly. Marcus smiled, not pressing. "That's all I ask." The following weekend, Claire stood outside the community center with Lily's small hand tucked tightly in her own. Her daughter's big brown eyes darted nervously around at the crowds of children and parents bustling inside. "Mommy, there are so many people," Lily whispered, pressing closer to Claire's hip. "I know, sweetheart. We're here to meet my friend Marcus and his kids. I think you'll like them." "Are they nice?" "Very nice," Claire assured her. "His daughter is close to your age." Inside, the air buzzed with laughter and the smell of finger paints. They found Marcus at a table near the painting station, crouched beside a dark-haired girl who was carefully brushing rainbow stripes across paper. Beside her, a boy slightly older sat in intense concentration, sketching a landscape with surprising detail. Marcus looked up and grinned. "Claire, you made it." She felt her stomach flip. Why does that smile feel like victory? Lily,
"This is my friend Marcus," Claire said gently. Marcus crouched to Lily's level, his voice warm but not intrusive. "Hi, Lily. I'm Marcus. That's my daughter Maya and my son Tyler." Maya looked up immediately, her curls bouncing. "Do you want to paint with us? I'm making a rainbow because my dad says rainbows come after storms." Lily blinked, then glanced up at her mother for reassurance. Claire nodded. Slowly, Lily released her hand and slid onto the bench beside Maya. Tyler gave a polite nod. "Hi, that's a pretty dress." Lily blushed, ducking her head. "Thank you." Within minutes, the three children were leaning over shared paints, collaborating on what looked like a chaotic but joyful masterpiece. Claire exhaled slowly. Her heart ached with relief. Marcus pulled out a chair beside her. "She fits right in." "She does," Claire admitted, her throat tight. "She hasn't laughed like this in weeks. That's why I bring my kids here. For them, it's not about activities. It's about realizing they're not the only ones. Divorce can make kids feel isolated, like their family is broken, while everyone else's is perfect. But here, they see that families come in all shapes." Claire studied him for a moment. His profile was steady, grounded. He wasn't just kind, he was intentional. And for the first time, she wondered not what it meant for Lily to meet his children, but what it might mean for her to keep Marcus in her life. Later that afternoon, a woman approached their table with a kind smile and eyes so much like Marcus's that Claire knew immediately who she was. "Rebecca, right?" the woman asked. "Claire," she corrected gently. "My apologies. Marcus has mentioned you. I'm Grace, his mother." Claire froze, surprised. "It's wonderful to meet you." Grace clasped her hand warmly. "He speaks of you often, and that must be Lily. Maya hasn't stopped talking about her new friend all week." The warmth in her tone, the effortless inclusion, nearly undid Claire. For months, she had been reduced to case files and accusations. To be spoken to simply as a mother, to be welcomed without pretense, felt like water on parched ground. Grace squeezed her hand. "You're stronger than you think, dear, and your daughter is lucky to have you fighting for her." Claire swallowed hard, blinking back sudden tears. "Thank you," she whispered. She glanced at Marcus, who stood a few feet away, helping Maya rinse paintbrushes. He caught her eye and smiled faintly, almost as if he knew exactly what his mother had just said. And in that moment, Claire realized something she had not dared to admit until now. Marcus Hale wasn't just a stranger who had sat down at her table. He was becoming an ally. And maybe, just maybe, something more.
The courthouse smelled of polished wood and tension. Claire Donovan sat at the petitioner's table, her palms clammy against the cool surface as she adjusted her blazer for the third time. To her right, her attorney, Linda Rodriguez, whispered last-minute reassurances. To her left, the empty chair David once occupied at dinner tables and family vacations now stood as a reminder of everything that had fractured. David strolled in moments later, crisp suit tailored to perfection, jaw tight with performative composure. His attorney, Michael Brooks, carried a briefcase bulging with files, the kind of man who weaponized every scrap of information, no matter how mundane, into ammunition. Claire's pulse hammered as the bailiff called the room to order. Judge Patricia Williams entered, her expression the no-nonsense sternness of someone who had seen every tactic family court could throw. She wasted no time. "We're here today to address Ms. Donovan's petition for court-ordered therapy for her daughter, Lily. Mr. Brooks, you filed a counter-motion. I'll hear you first." Michael Brooks rose with theatrical solemnity. "Your Honor, my client has grave concerns regarding Ms. Donovan's recent behavior. We believe her activities demonstrate erratic judgment and risk confusing the child about family roles. As such, we are requesting supervised visitation from Ms. Donovan until these concerns are addressed." Claire's stomach plummeted. Supervised visitation? The words tasted like poison. The judge raised an eyebrow. "What specific concerns, Mr. Brooks?" Brooks opened his briefcase and produced a folder. He laid out a series of photographs on the evidence table, images that made Claire's breath catch. There she was, at the community center beside Marcus, watching their children paint. Another photo, at Laurelhurst Park, Lily holding Maya's hand while Tyler pushed Tyler on the swing. A third, outside the Children's Museum, Claire laughing at something Marcus had said while their kids skipped ahead. "These, Your Honor," Brooks said gravely, "show Ms. Donovan involving her daughter in repeated outings with a male companion and his children. This creates dangerous confusion for Lily, fostering unrealistic expectations about family reconciliation. We believe this demonstrates poor judgment and an inability to prioritize the child's emotional stability." Claire felt heat surge to her cheeks, shame, outrage, fear. Someone had followed them. Someone had turned innocent afternoons into evidence of wrongdoing. Judge Williams leaned over the photographs, her face unreadable. "Mr. Brooks, what I see are adults supervising children at public places. Are you suggesting single mothers are prohibited from having male friends?" "Not at all, Your Honor," Brooks replied smoothly. "But coupled with Ms. Donovan's refusal to sign reasonable custody agreements and her insistence on unnecessary therapeutic interventions, this pattern raises concerns about emotional instability and alienation of the child from her father." "Unnecessary therapy?" Claire's voice burst out before she could stop it, raw and incredulous. Linda placed a calming hand on her arm before rising. "Your Honor, this is an outrageous attempt to weaponize normal social activity. Ms. Donovan has every right to seek support from friends, and her decision to pursue therapy for Lily is not only reasonable, but consistent with research on child development during divorce. Furthermore, Mr. Donovan's sudden scrutiny of Lily's day-to-day activities is deeply ironic, given his documented absence from her daily life throughout the marriage." Brooks stepped forward, his voice like silk. "Your Honor, we simply wish to prevent confusion. Imagine the child's distress when her mother introduces her to another family unit as though it could replace her father." Claire's throat tightened. She wanted to scream that she had never tried to replace David, only to fill the aching void he left when he failed Lily again and again. The judge held up a hand. "Enough, Mr. Brooks. In my 12 years on this bench, I've seen every manipulative tactic possible. This motion appears less concerned with Lily's welfare and more concerned with controlling Ms. Donovan." Brooks bristled. "Your Honor?" The judge's eyes sharpened. "Be careful, counselor. I'm granting Ms. Donovan's request for therapy. Lily's adjustment is paramount, and therapeutic support will aid her. Additionally, I'm ordering a neutral custody evaluation. Both parents will be assessed for their ability to prioritize Lily's needs over personal grievances." The gavel struck. Final. Claire sat frozen, her breath trembling out of her. Relief warred with humiliation, because even in victory, she'd been dragged through mud. Outside the courtroom, she stumbled into the sunlight, adrenaline still buzzing in her veins. Her phone buzzed in her bag. Marcus. How did it go? Her fingers hovered. Then, instead of typing, she pressed call. He answered on the first ring. "Claire? You sound shaken. What happened?" "They used photos of us. Photos of me, of you, of the kids. They tried to make it look like I'm an unfit mother for having a friend." There was silence, then his voice, steady, warm. "Where are you?" "In the parking lot." "Stay there. I'm coming." 20 minutes later, Marcus slid into the passenger seat of her car. He reached for her hand without hesitation, his palm steady against her trembling fingers. "Tell me everything," he said softly. She did. Every accusation, every photograph, every word twisted against her. Her voice cracked halfway through, but he didn't interrupt. When she finished, she collapsed against the seat, humiliated. "I should never have dragged you into this. It's my fight, not yours." Marcus turned to her, his gaze fierce. "Claire, look at me." She did. "You didn't drag me into anything. We became friends. Our kids became friends. That's life. That's healing. Don't let David or his lawyer turn something good into something shameful. They can't redefine what this is unless you let them." Tears burned her eyes. "But what if it hurts your reputation? You testify in court cases. You're supposed to be neutral." He squeezed her hand. "I'll worry about my reputation. Right now, I'm worried about you and Lily." For a long moment, silence filled the car, thick but not suffocating. Claire stared out at the courthouse steps, families filing in and out, each one carrying battles of their own. Then she whispered, "The judge ordered a custody evaluation. That could decide everything." Marcus nodded. "That's good. Evaluators care about what matters. Consistency, emotional safety, who actually shows up. You'll shine in that, and I'll help you prepare." She turned to him, hope sparking beneath exhaustion. "You'd do that?" "Of course." His eyes softened. "But Claire, there's something else we need to be honest about." Her heart sank. "You think we should stop seeing each other?" "No." He held her gaze. "I think we need to acknowledge what's happening. Somewhere along the way, this stopped being just friendship for me. And I think it stopped being just friendship for you, too." The words hung in the air between them, terrifying and exhilarating all at once. "Marcus," she shook her head, "everything's already so complicated. I can't—" He interrupted gently. "I'm not asking you to decide anything. I'm asking us not to lie to ourselves. Pretending nothing is happening won't make the feelings go away. It'll only make us miss something that could be beautiful." Claire's breath caught. She thought of Lily's laughter with Maya and Tyler, of the way Marcus's voice steadied her panic, of the glimpse of peace she'd felt in his presence when everything else was chaos. "What if acknowledging it makes everything worse?" she whispered. He leaned closer, his voice low and steady. "What if pretending it doesn't exist makes us miss the best thing we'll ever find?" Claire closed her eyes, her heart a battlefield between fear and possibility. And for the first time since her marriage began to crumble, she wondered if something better could rise from the ashes.
The waiting room smelled faintly of lemon polish and stale paper. Claire Donovan sat on the edge of her chair, hands clasped tightly in her lap, staring at the frosted glass door that led to the office of Dr. Sarah Chen, the custody evaluator appointed by Judge Williams. Months of turmoil had led to this moment. Her throat was dry, her chest tight. The outcome of Dr. Chen's evaluation could reshape Lily's entire childhood. Claire's attorney had warned her to expect tough questions. She'd spent nights preparing, replaying scenarios in her head, bracing herself for David's inevitable attempts to paint her as unstable. Yet when the door opened, and Dr. Chen beckoned her in with a calm smile, Claire felt her defenses soften. Inside, the evaluator's office was unexpectedly warm. Plants in corners, children's drawings pinned to the walls, bookshelves crowded with titles on child psychology. Dr. Chen gestured toward a chair. "Miss Donovan, thank you for your patience. I've completed my observations and interviews. I'd like to share my findings." Claire's breath caught. "Please." Dr. Chen folded her hands over a notepad. "First, let me say this. Lily is a resilient, bright child. She clearly loves both her parents. That's important." Relief pricked Claire's eyes. "However," Dr. Chen continued, her tone measured, "there are stark differences in the home environments I observed. In your home, Lily receives consistency, predictable routines, emotional attunement, a sense of safety. She expresses her worries, and you respond with validation and comfort." Claire swallowed, bracing. "In your ex-husband's home, while material comforts are abundant, there is a notable lack of emotional connection. Promises are often unfulfilled. Lily displayed anxiety before visits with her father and expressed confusion afterward." Tears blurred Claire's vision. "So, what does that mean for custody?" Dr. Chen smiled gently. "I am recommending primary custody with you. Mr. Donovan should continue visitation, but I advise that overnight visits resume only after he completes co-parenting classes, and the therapy you requested for Lily is not only appropriate but essential." For a moment, Claire couldn't breathe. Relief crashed through her so fiercely, she thought she might sob right there. Instead, she managed a trembling nod. "Thank you. Thank you so much." "You fought hard for your daughter," Dr. Chen said. "Now, it's time to focus on healing, for both of you." When Claire stepped out into the parking lot, sunlight felt different on her skin. Brighter, warmer, almost like grace. She spotted Marcus leaning against his car, arms crossed, waiting just as he'd promised. Her pace quickened. "She recommended primary custody," she blurted as soon as she reached him. Marcus's face broke into a smile so wide it transformed him. He pulled her into an embrace before she could stop him, his voice low against her hair. "Claire, that's incredible. I knew you could do it." Her body trembled against his, months of pent-up tension releasing all at once. When she finally pulled back, her eyes were wet, but her smile was real. "I couldn't have done it without you. You've given me perspective, strength. You made me believe I could fight for Lily." "No, Claire, you did this. You fought for your daughter when giving up would have been easier." She studied him in the afternoon light, realizing something she had resisted admitting for weeks. This man wasn't just her ally. He was becoming her safe place. "Marcus, I've been thinking about what you said in the car after court, about acknowledging what's between us." His gaze held hers, steady and unflinching. And I think you're right." Her voice trembled, but the words were clear. "This isn't just friendship anymore. It hasn't been for a long time." He exhaled slowly, relief flickering across his face. "So what do we do about it?" "I don't know," she admitted, laughing nervously. "All I know is that I care about you, that I trust you with Lily, that when I'm with you, I feel stronger than I have in years. That's what healthy looks like. Partnership built on support, not control." Her lips curved. "So maybe we try, carefully, with Lily's well-being as our anchor." "Exactly," Marcus said. Then, as though the moment demanded it, he leaned in and kissed her, gentle, patient, full of promise. For the first time since her marriage collapsed, Claire felt not just relief, but peace. 6 months later, Sunday dinners at Marcus's house had become tradition. Claire found herself standing in the kitchen with his mother Grace, stirring a pot of gumbo while the children's laughter floated in from the backyard. Lily, Tyler, and Maya had become inseparable, forming a bond that soothed the raw edges of their parents' past wounds. "You look happy," Grace said with a knowing smile, watching Claire out of the corner of her eye. "I am," Claire admitted, "happier than I thought possible a year ago." "My son is happy too," Grace said warmly. "It's been a long time since I've seen him laugh the way he does with you." Through the window, Claire saw Marcus pushing all 3 kids on the tire swing, their shrieks of joy ringing through the air. Her chest ached with gratitude. "He's the best man I've ever known," she whispered. Grace touched her arm gently. "And you're good for him. You remind him that even after pain, there can be joy." That night, after dinner and bedtime routines and stories that stretched too long because none of the kids wanted the night to end, Claire and Marcus finally sat together on the porch. The air was warm, the stars faint above Portland's glow. "Thank you," Claire said quietly. "For what?" Marcus asked. "For seeing me when I couldn't see myself, for helping me fight for what mattered, for showing me what love looks like when it's built on respect." He reached for her hand. "Thank you for trusting me with your heart, and with Lily, for letting me be part of your broken pieces." Her throat tightened. Not broken anymore, just rebuilt. 1 year later, Claire stood once again before Judge Williams. This time, there were no motions or counter-motions, no accusations or photographs twisted into weapons. This time, there was joy. Claire and Marcus had filed petitions to adopt each other's children, solidifying what had already become reality: a family,
built not from blood alone, but from choice and intention. "It is rare," Judge Williams said warmly as she signed the paperwork, "to see families formed with such deliberate love. These children are lucky." Claire glanced at Lily, who beamed in her new dress, clutching Maya's hand with one and Tyler's with the other. "Does this mean Marcus is really my daddy now?" Lily whispered. Claire bent to kiss her daughter's hair. "If you want him to be?" "I do," Lily said firmly, her eyes shining. The celebration afterward at Grace's house overflowed with food, laughter, and the kind of belonging Claire had once believed she'd lost forever. Family. Messy, chosen, blended, real, filled every corner. Later that evening, as the children chased fireflies in the yard, Claire leaned against Marcus on the porch swing. "Happy?" he asked softly. "More than I ever thought possible," she said. "You?" "Completely." He kissed her temple. "We built something beautiful, Claire, from broken pieces." She looked out at the three children, at their laughter lighting up the dusk, and knew he was right. They hadn't just survived. They had built forever.